Check, check. It's Genesis 21. We'll just, if you haven't read Genesis 22, then it's a good time. Maybe you can we have 2 more minutes to start. So we can just, if you can read through Genesis chapter 22, we'll just start a few thoughts from Genesis 21 to revise our thought patterns, and then we'll begin with Genesis 22. So take a few minutes and read Genesis 22. देखो again. Thank you for this time together and just minister to us through your word, scriptures. Thank you for all those who are joining online, and just speak to their hearts too. And we pray in Jesus' name. Amen. Okay, so Genesis 21, we just do a quick review. Isaac is born, right? The promise of God comes to fruition. And it says, and the Lord took note of Sarah as he had said, and the Lord did for Sarah as he had promised, right? So this is an aspect, God fulfilling his promise. Verse 6, God has made laughter for me. Everyone who hears will laugh with me. Okay, so that's another fulfillment of the promise. And, and 7, she said, who would have said to Abraham and Sarah would nurse children? Yet I have borne him a son in his old age, right? So verses 9 to 21 is Sarah going against Hagar, and Hagar is asked to move away. And when we look at this, it says the problem begins where the son of Hagar is, whom she had borne to Abraham, is mocking. And so drive out this maid and her son, for the son of this maid shall not be an heir with my son Isaac, right? So it's a family issue, and God is, in a sense, Sarah is asking Abraham to ask Hagar and Ishmael to move out, right? He's approximately 17 years old by this time. And in the New Testament, Galatians 4:29 and 30 speaks of this aspect. Why? Because he's not the promised child. How was he born? They went to Egypt. Hagar came from Egypt, not in the lineage, and now he's mocking. And we said last time, it's the flesh will always mock the work of the Spirit, right? So the believer has to be careful. If we are walking in the flesh, then the flesh is never pleasing to God. In the sense, it never drives towards God. It never wants God. Okay, Ishmael is a picture of that. In that sense, no spirituality, and he is mocking the promise of God, right? The answer of God. And so, is Abraham right in sending her out? Yes. And this is Galatians 4:30. Even Paul said that this was the right thing that was happening, because though Abraham loves Ishmael, and he's grieved with Sarah's demand, but the revelation is there, right? Isaac's son. In Isaac, Abraham's seed would go forward, and that's what God would work through them. So he sends them away, and we see that, they have no water. They begin to lose. She said in verse 15, when the water in the skin was used up, she left the boy under one of the bushes, went away, sat down opposite him, about a bow shot away. And for she said, do not let me see my boy die. And she sat opposite him and lifted up her voice and wept. God heard the lad crying, not her, And the angel of the Lord called out to Hagar from heaven and said to her, what is the matter with you, Hagar? Do not fear. God has heard the voice of the lad where he is. 16 years ago, she had a similar issue. Did God hear her? Yes, he did. Why is she not believing now? Human tendency. We very easily forget what God has provided and given and promised us. Okay? It's a human tendency. We are quick to forget what God has promised and what God has provided, and we are quick to remember what we did not get. So she's issuing the same problems, right? And this is when does this come? When there is a problem. And you can see here, arise, lift up the lad, hold him by the hand, I will make a great nation out of him. And then God opened her eyes, and she saw a well of water, and she went and filled the skin of water, God was with the lad. He grew up, lived in the wilderness, and became an archer. He lived in the wilderness of Paran. His mother took a wife from him, from the land of Egypt. Like, the provision was already there, but she could not see it. The promise was already given, but she could not remember it. And sometimes in prayer, we ask for things we already have, and then we think the answer is not coming. So we already have some things, and we're still asking God, and God is saying, open your eyes, it's right there. There is a well there, but she can't see it. And if she had just remembered what God had done 16 years ago, in a similar circumstances, she would have remembered, that God would be faithful, but she leaves the lad. And maybe it's the boy who cries out to God. And it's very interesting that how the words are put. I have heard the cry of the lad, not her, It's very interesting how God has put it there. So maybe he is the one who's asking and not her, And in verse 22, it came about at that time, Abimelech and Pichol, commander of the army, spoke to Abraham, and God is with you in all things. And so verses 22 to 33 of chapter 21 is the abundant blessing of God on Abraham's life. We see that happening here. Abimelech recognized him as his equal, and we can see that happening. Abraham now names the place Beersheba, well of oath, or the well of seven. 7 is always counted as the number of heaven's perfection. It's 7, right? So here he says, Abimelech in 29, verse 29 of chapter 21. Abimelech said to Abraham, what do these 7 ewe lambs mean, which you have set by themselves? And he said, you shall take these 7 ewe lambs from my hands, that it may be a witness before me that I dug this well. And he called the place Beersheba, because there the two of them took an oath. So they made a covenant at Beersheba, and Abimelech and Pichol, commander of his army, arose, returned to the land of the Philistines. And Abraham planted a tamarisk tree in Beersheba, and he called on the name of the Lord. Now there's a new word here. First time you will hear it in Scripture, everlasting God. Okay, and that's El Olam. Okay, El Olam. And Abraham sojourned in the land for many days. Okay, so why did he plant the tamarisk tree? It's a memorial. Okay, between his promise and Abimelech's promise that this land is for him. Okay, He called on the name of the Yahweh means worship, public worship, okay? Everlasting God. And he goes back. So Genesis 22 is his supreme test. Now, you will see through the life of Abraham these tests. And if you are reading from 11 onwards, you have seen many tests have come through his way. Why does God test us? Otherwise, if he does not test us, how will we know where we are spiritually speaking? So the tests are to determine our spirituality, okay? Not for anything else. And we have said this before. We need to understand the difference between the test and the temptation. Very simple to remember. Temptation from desires within, initiated by the devil to bring the worst in you. Okay? Temptation from the desires of our heart, James chapter 1. Okay, I think it's 12 to 14. Then, devil is the initiator of it, and the purpose is to bring out the worst in us. Test, ordained by God, James chapter 1 again, verses 2 to 6. Okay, test ordained by God, right? The Holy Spirit guides us in those, And this is the Lord does it, right? And what is the purpose? To bring out the best in us. So those are two different things. Sometimes in the scriptures, some places test and temptations are interchangeably used. And God tempted means God tested. So it's not God tempting, it's God testing. God will never tempt a person, because temptations come from our own natural desires, and the initiator is always the enemy. Okay? James 1, 12 to 16. And the purpose is to always bring out the worst in us, and the test is always to bring out the best in us. And that's why we focus on promises and not on explanations. That's why we focus on the word and not on opinions. Okay? So that's the reason why God will test us. Otherwise, there is no idea, how are we going to be, how do we know where we are spiritually? Okay? Genesis 11, Abraham is a family test. Leave your home to a place that I will show you. Did he pass or fail? Yes. Genesis 12 is the famine test. Did he pass or fail? He failed. He went down to Egypt, right? Genesis 13, he has the fellowship test. Lot, you choose. I will choose to be with God. Simple. He has that test. He says, okay, I don't want whatever, I'll choose to be with God. Genesis 14 is the fight test. Go and rescue Lot with 318 men. He went by faith, won the victory. Then in Genesis 14, there is another test of money. The king of Sodom says, give me your men, take the money. He says, no, I rather choose to be with God. Okay? So there is, Genesis 16 is again the test of being a father, right? Here, take Hagar. The child will come through him. He fails the test. He fails the test, right? And this happens. In Genesis 21, send your son away. Ishmael, not the chosen one. Someone has called that test farewell test. Say bye to Hagar and Ishmael. And he does it. And Genesis 20 is his biggest test. The sacrifice one. Is God first or his most beloved son first? He will pass the test. So if you read, should I say it again? I just randomly said it. So Genesis 11, family, leave the Ur of the Chaldees. Okay. Genesis 12, famine test, go down to Egypt or no. He failed this test. First one, he passed it. You could say partially passed it because he took Lot and his father along, but he came out. That was the answer. 13 was the fellowship test. He gives Lot to choose the land. He doesn't choose it. He says Lot can choose. 14th is the test of war, 318 men versus kings. He wins that. Then 14 again is the money test, where he will refuse Sodom's money, king of Sodom. He won't take his money, and he will choose to follow God. 16, test of the father. He shortcuts the promise of God. He fails this test. He goes ahead with Hagar, listens to the voice of his wife and not to the voice of God. In 21 is also they call it, sending away or farewell test. Sends away, Hagar and Ishmael. And 22 will be the test of his son, the most beloved one. And so what is this test basically signifying in Genesis 22? God has given you everything. What God gave you is that more important than God. So it's very interesting, because when you come to this point, you begin to think, why would God want us? Why would God want us to give back what He has given us? Like, okay, He makes you wait for 25 years for a son, then 25 years later, or 50, whatever Isaac's age was, the people say it is most scholars believe between 18 to 25. That's what his age was. He was not a baby. Because he understands sacrifice. He understands that you need sacrifice, you need a lamb, he needs those things. So, why would he do that? Why give what you want and then ask for it back again? And the real test of faith is, when God asks you to bear something that is unbearable, and expect something that seems to be impossible. That's where real faith comes. Like, He gives you the test where you think, I cannot bear this. Or, how can this be? Like, this is impossible. That's where your faith is really tested. And in those places when you trust God, I cannot bear this burden. This is too much for me. And God says, by faith, let's walk here together. Let's see if we can do this. Because it's not dependent upon you, it's upon me. Many times people will take Genesis 22 and think Abraham is the hero of the chapter. No, God is the hero of this chapter. Because God would give the promise, God would take him to the land, God would provide for everything, and then the lamb is there. So it's just the faith of God. So sometimes it's bearing the unbearable, expecting the most impossible thing. This can never happen. Really? Nothing's impossible for God. That's the whole idea. Sometimes our faith is tested that way. It's tested that way, that it's not based upon what we think is possible. It could very well be impossible. Here is something I got from a commentary, and you can take it down. And where does God provide? In the place of His assignment, in a sense, if you're in the will of God. Okay? Where does God provide? Okay? In His place of assignment, geographically, where you are, where God has asked you to be. That's where He will provide. When does He provide or meet our needs? Just when we need them. Not before, not later, because He is never late. Exactly when we need them. Okay? So, in our minds it could be earlier. In our minds it could be later, but it's right on time. It's right exactly when it is time. How does He provide? Graciously, by His grace. It's not going to be something supernatural falling from the sky. It will be normal things happening in your life, and that suddenly it comes to happen. That's His way. It's not something, like, sign happens. It's just normal, regular course of life. But you realize it's because of His grace. This could not happen. It could not happen, but that's His gracious way of handling things, To whom does He provide? To those who obey Him and trust Him. Simple. Those who are in His will. People who do not walk into the will of God, do not walk as God wants them to, should not expect God to provide for them. Satan may provide for them, and they may think it is God. So if a person is not in the will of God, not walking according to the will of God, not obeying what God has said, then there is no chance that God will provide for them. The enemy may provide. And they may think, look, just think like this. Abraham going to Egypt, was it the will of God? No. What did he get? He may have got animals and Hagar, but see the trouble now. See the trouble that is happening in the family. Who has to suffer the most? Abraham. Right? He lost his testimony there because he called his wife, his sister. He came back because of the herds. There's a problem between him and Lot. Then his wife says, go through Hagar. Then when it happens, Then she begins to dislike Hagar. So who has to deal with all these issues? Abraham has to deal with these issues. Why? Because he was outside of the will of God. He did what God did not want him to do. He should have just trusted. Then the child is born. Then Isaac is born. Now he has to send them away. So he's going through all the trouble. Why? Because he went outside of God's will. And people could say, oh, he went down, he got Hagar, he got animals, he got this, but they all brought problem. They all brought. If he had stayed where he was in Bethel, would God have not provided? Of course he would have. But he chose to go out. So when you think of this, to whom does God give? And for whom does God provide? Well, to the ones who walk according to the will of God and who are obeying him and trusting him. Simple. And if you don't trust, you will not obey. You cannot obey without trusting. Blind obedience, that doesn't happen. That's got nothing to do with it. Who am I trusting for my obedience? If I'm not trusting God, then whom am I trusting? And finally, why does God do all this? That's the question that bothers everyone. Why do I have to go through all this? For the glory of his name. God will get the glory out of it all. God will get the glory out of it all. So I'll repeat. Where does God provide? In his place where he has called the person. When does he provide our meet our needs? Exactly when we need them. How does he provide? Graciously. Normal, natural way. Okay. To whom does he give? Those who are walking in his will, who trust him and obey him. And fifth, why does he do it? For the glory of his name. Okay. For the glory of his name. So, this is Abraham's trial, Genesis 22. It came about these things. God tested Abraham and said to him, Abraham, he said, here I am. Take now your son, your only son, whom you love, Isaac. Go to the land of Moriah. Offer him there as a burnt offering on one of the mountains which I will show you. Habakkuk chapter 2 verse 4. The just shall live by faith. Okay, that's the verse. Habakkuk 2:4. The just shall live by what? Faith. Now, if you read that translation correctly, it says, the just shall live by his faith. It is not our faith, it is God's faith. God gives us the faith to trust him. If you don't, I have faith, you don't have faith. God gives you. Romans chapter 11, I think Romans 13 and 14 speaks about this. To each one has been given a measure of faith. God gives you the measure of faith, right? And then he tests you to expand your capacity to believe, okay? So that's his way of doing it, And this chapter is also a great picture of Christ on the cross. There's a great picture there. And so Abraham rose in the morning, saddled his donkey, took 2 of his young men, Isaac his son, split the wood for the burnt offering, and went to the place which God had told him. Instant obedience, right? There is instant obedience there. He is not talking to anyone now. He's not discussing. He's not saying, what do you think? Now imagine if he goes to Sarah with this option. Hey, God is calling us to sacrifice Isaac. She would have no way. I got him at age 90. I'm not letting him go. He doesn't do it. He just goes out, cuts the wood. He doesn't tell his servants. No one knows. He just does it. It's between him and God. It's a great picture of faith. When we are assured of what God has given us and spoken to us and promised us, we just walk by faith. And it's good to see because his faith is contagious. The others will catch on to it. Others will catch on to it because they will say, verse 5, he says to the young men, stay here with the donkey, I and the lad will go up. We will worship and what? Return back to you. Think like this. He's not saying, he says, we will go up and we both coming back. He knew God would raise his son back or somehow provide for the lamb. Because the entire journey, both the father and son must be wondering, Isaac is there, but there is no lamb. So Abraham's mind is very simple. He's saying, okay, if I'm going to sacrifice my son, the promise in 15 Genesis is given by God. If he dies, then God will raise him up. Resurrection. Simple. That's his mind. Because how else will God's promise go further? So he has that belief. Or God will provide a substitute. Both of them come true in Jesus. When you read the story, he goes and he raises the knife, then God calls out. Right? Now, every time God calls out here in this chapter, there is one answer only by Abraham. Here I am. 3 times God calls out, Abraham, here I am. There is no question. He's just ready to. And this is an aspect of a believer saying, I am ready. Whenever you call, I am ready. I am not questioning you. Whatever you say, I'm going to do this. He says, here I am. Do not stretch out your hand against the lad. I love this portion because when I think of this, God would call out to Abraham and say, don't kill Isaac. But when it came to his own son, Jesus Christ, he didn't stop. He didn't stop. He said, no, let him die. And then he will die, he will be buried, and he will rise again. Greater sacrifice. So it's a picture of what would happen on the cross. Abraham, don't stretch your hand out. Withheld your son, your only son. And then there is a ram in the thicket, verse 13. And Abraham called the place the Lord will provide. Okay? Yahweh Jireh. As it is said to this day, in the mount of the Lord it will be provided. And the angel of the Lord called Abraham a second time and said, by myself I have sworn, declares the Lord, because you have done this thing and not withheld your son and your only son, I will greatly bless you, greatly multiply your seed as the stars of the heaven and as the sand which is on the seashore, and your seed shall possess the gate of their enemies. In your seed, all the nations of the earth shall be blessed because you have obeyed my voice. What an amazing promise, In your seed, all the nations of the earth will be blessed. I like this. And how much land does Abraham have? He only has a promise. He has not yet inherited the land. He'll probably never enter that place. He will never get it. Only his descendants will get it. And yet, look at the promise that God has given. The nations of this world will be blessed. The nations of this world will be blessed. It's unbelievable how God works. And that's the victory of his faith. This is verses 11 to 19. This is the victory of his faith. And always as I say, we always must remember the test here was done, but the real hero, or in a sense, the real aspect in this is look at God. See what God is doing. Emphasis is not on Abraham's performance, but the provision of God. Because no one could promise Abraham the nations of the world will be blessed through your line. Abraham could not do it. God had to do it. And so Abraham returns to his young men. They arose, went together to Beersheba, and he lived in Beersheba. And it came about after these things that it was told to Abraham, behold, Milcah has also borne children to your brother Nahor. And there is family issues going on there. And chapter 23, Sarah. And in your manual, I think this is chapter 14, right? 22 verse 20 onwards to 25. But 23, she is 127 years old. Sarah lived 127 years, and these were the years of her life of Sarah. She died in Kiryat Arba, Hebron, the land of Canaan. Abraham went to mourn for Sarah and to weep for her. So, in verses 1 to 20, you will say how he, gets the land for her. There is a discussion going on. What's the price? And if you read the chapter, you find out that they are asking for a heavy price because they want to buy the whole land. And he does not even compromise, right? He buries her there in the field of Machpelah. He buries Sarah. And a lot of their life is lived outside the promised land. And he's finally able to bury her in the promised land. So you see how the distraction of the enemy is. They have lived outside the land. He is trying to get a place in the land to bury his wife. But what's going on? Everyone is wanting a piece. No, they are raising the price high. I want this. It's very interesting when you read the chapter what's going on. He does not say a word. He says whatever. And he just takes it on and moves. Okay, so you can read the chapter later. We're not going to discuss a lot about it. Chapter 24 is a bride for Isaac. And this is, by the way, this is a great chapter for young people to understand how to choose a bride, okay, for their lives. Anyone watching should understand, right? Yeah, it's a great chapter. You can see a lot of principles that when someone wants to choose a godly mate, this is the pattern is laid out here very clearly. Very simply, the pattern is laid out, okay? So, Abraham was old, advanced in years, and this is, I think, in chapter 14, selecting a committed mate, right? That's the heading. So choosing of a life partner. And this is 3 years after Sarah's death. And the Lord had blessed Abraham in every way. If you have never seen that verse, underline it. This is how God takes care of his people. If you are walking by faith in the will of God, obeying God, trusting God, this happens today. Abraham is blessed where? Every aspect of his life. Do you know of anyone else who was blessed in every aspect of their life? You read David's life, it's in 2 Samuel. Every aspect of his life is blessed from 2 Samuel 4 onwards. Everything he does, he gets it. God does it. Now, we don't seek and think, because Ephesians chapter 1 tells us we are already blessed with all spiritual blessings. So we don't have, in a sense, we are not striving to get the blessing. We are already blessed, and that's why we are living. What we get materially or physically, that's a different aspect. Again, that is faith. But we are not following a law to be blessed. We are already blessed in Christ Jesus. Okay? All spiritual blessings are already ours. We don't have to fight. We don't have to, sacrifice. We don't have to follow a law. When we believed, we are all spiritually blessed. How many spiritual blessings? All. To whom? Every single person who believes. So if you are here and you don't believe it. Ephesians very clearly says you are blessed with all spiritual blessings. Not one is missing in your life. If you have failed to recognize it, that's a different issue. Go to God and ask him, reveal, and he will. But you are blessed with what? All spiritual blessings. Abraham said to his servant, oldest of his household, who had charge of all he owned, place your hand under my thigh, and I will make you swear by the Lord, the God of heaven, the God of earth, that you shall not take a wife for my son from the daughter of the Canaanites among whom I live. Now, where was the land given to Abraham? Canaan. But why is he saying don't take it from the Canaanites? He is not yet inherited it. What's the promise given to Abraham? Your descendants will get it. So he says, I don't want from the Canaanites. I don't want anyone from the Canaanites. This custom of placing the hand under the thigh is like swearing an oath. This was a part of it in the Middle East. Okay, so this is swearing, keeping God as the witness. God remains the witness. Okay, so, and think like this. We are the bride, right? But who is the bridegroom? Jesus Christ. In a sense, God, out of his love, gave Christ, the bride, the church. This is all Ephesians chapter 1, 1 to 14. If you read it, all three are involved in the work. Chapters 1, 3 to 6, it's the work of God the Father. 7 to 12 is work of Jesus Christ. And 13 and 14 is the work of the Holy Spirit. The Trinity is involved in the blessing and we being the bride of Christ. We being the bride of Christ. Just see how many positional truths are there in those 14 verses. Okay? Maybe we can do it in the break. How many things have been given to us in those 14 verses? Who we are. And I think there are about 11 of them. 11 different things given to the believer the moment they believe. And so we are, like Abraham is searching for a bride for his son. And we are the bride of Christ, right? And so this is a beautiful picture. And Abraham is calling his servant. But you will go to my country, to my relatives, and take a wife for my son Isaac. And the servant said, suppose the woman is not willing to follow me to this land. Should I take your son back to the land from where you came? And Abraham said, beware that you do not take my son back there. Okay. He is not going. Verse 7, the Lord, the God of heaven, who took me from my father's house and from the land of my birth, and who spoke to me and swore to me, saying, to your descendants I will give the land. He will send his angel before you, and you will take a wife for my son from there. But if the woman is not willing to follow, then you will be free from this oath. Only do not take my son back there. The servant placed his hand, swore to him, and the servant took 10 camels from the camels of his master and set out. Why 10 camels? expectancy. He is going to get it. What did Abraham say? The angel of the Lord will show it to you. So what is involved in this process? It's the man who is initiating, and we teach this to our youth, that when you're in a relation, when you're seeking for someone to marry, wait for the man to initiate to you. The woman should not go and initiate to the man and say, oh, I think God has called us. No, it is the man who initiates. Okay. What do you see second? Is waited. They waited. Isaac was not in a hurry. Abraham was not in a hurry. They were like, oh, fine, in God's timing, right? In God's timing it will happen. And why did he say, do not take from the Canaanite? They were idolaters. They sacrificed to pagan gods. Very clear. I don't want to take from someone who do not believe in the God that I believe. Very clear. Very systematic, And so when this picture is beautiful because it's a long chapter, more than 60 verses. But the issue in this is the guidebook or the manual for relationships today. It's even valid today. You see everything that a relationship should be. Everything. It's the will of God, right? Are they believers too? No. Then I don't want from there. Why? You trust God. We are not in a hurry. The servant is saying, I'm taking 10 camels because I believe God will provide. As simple as that, as simple as that. He has faith, correct? And then what does he do? He prays. When he reaches the place, what does he pray? I will go and ask these women for water. If they say, we'll water your camels also, then that means this is the one God wants. So there is prayer involved. How do you know if she is the right one? Prayer. Now, giving water to 10 camels is not easy. If you know how much water one camel drinks. And imagine she is a woman drawing water from the well. And after giving him, there are 10 more camels. So, and you notice something. She does not complain. She says, yeah, I am ready. Would you also see? So he goes here. Verse 12, he said, O Lord, God of my master Abraham, please grant me success today. Show loving kindness to my master Abraham. Behold, I am standing by the spring. The daughters of the men of the city are coming out to draw water. May it be the girl to whom I say, please let down your jar so that I may drink. And who answers says, drink, I will water your camels also. May she be the one whom you have appointed for your servant Isaac. By this I will know that you have shown loving kindness to my master. Right? We tell the youth, when you pray for someone you want, please be specific with God. I want so and so. What do you mean? Don't ask random things from God. God, send the one who is, blessed one. So, okay, what do you mean blessed one? No, she should just be there. Be specific with God. Don't publish it. No need to tell everyone else what you're praying, but be specific. Be specific with God, and say, this is what I want, this is what I want, this is what I want. You can have a long list, Who cares? God knows how to trim it and bring it to the spiritual part, right? Parishtar and Sneha laughing. How long did you all wait? 5 years. Who was in more of a hurry after 5 years? No. Right, I was thinking of Haksar and Achir, I was going to interview them, but they are not here. If they see online, then we'll interview them later, What is this picture of? The Holy Spirit guides. So what are we seeing so far? Patience, faith, will of God, spirituality. We are seeing Holy Spirit guiding. Entire heaven will guide and lead us to the right person that God has in mind for us, if we follow it God's way. If I take shortcuts and I have my own desires, go ahead, Sometimes people are not willing to wait. No, outward features are more important. Inward we will develop. No, It doesn't work that way. Before he had finished speaking, Rebekah was born to Bethuel, son of Milcah, verse 15. Wife of Abraham's brother, came out with a jar in her shoulder. He goes back to my people. Is she from the people? Yes. She was a beautiful virgin. No man had relations with her. She went down to the spring, filled up a jar, came up, please let me drink a little water from your jar. She said, drink, my lord. I will also draw for your camels until they have finished drinking. Approximately 150 to 200 liters one camel takes in. Can you imagine? You know, going back, drawing that much money to give, or drawing that much water to give it to those camels. She quickly emptied her jar into the trough, ran back to the well or the trough, and she drew for all his camels, right? All his camels, right? So you can see that here, the man was gazing in silence to know whether the Lord had made his journey successful or not. And so there's a whole, in verses 50 to 61, Laban and Bethuel, the sequence is narrated. And then it says there, in 10 days they had to wait. Okay, 10 days they had to wait. And I think it's in verse, there's another thing I was talking about. Yeah. They called Rebekah, verse 58, and said to him, are you willing to go with this man? And she said, I will go. So it's not that it is forced. She had to say yes. Okay, she had to say yes. Thus they sent her away, sister Rebekah, her nurse, and Abraham's servant, his men, and they blessed Rebekah to her and said, may you, our sister, become thousands of 10,000s, and may your descendants possess the gates of those who hate them. Rebekah arose with her maids, mounted the camels, followed the men, and the servants took Rebekah back. When they are on the way back, verse 63, Isaac was out to meditate in the field towards evening. He was not waiting for the servant. He was occupied with God, right? And this is another thing that we see, that he is separated himself to God, right? He has separated himself to God. And then when he lifts up his eyes, the camels were coming. Rebekah lifted her eyes, saw Isaac dismounted. And this is basically submitting, saying, yes, I agree, you are the one that God has said. Verse 67 is amazing. Isaac brought her to the mother, Sarah's tent. He took Rebekah, and she became his wife, and he loved her. And Isaac was comforted after his mother's death by Rebekah. Like he brings her to his mother's tent, and she is there, and she comforts him. And this is beautiful to see, because this is how God brings people together. This is how God brings people together. There is nothing in this whole chapter or in this whole story that you find is if or. Everything is by faith, everything God is involved in, and the people are obeying and trusting and simply following God. They are willing to wait, they are willing to pray, they are willing to have patience. But at both times, Rebekah is occupied serving, and Isaac is occupied studying with God. So they are doing what God has called them to do. And their hearts are open to serve. Their hearts are open to be ready for God. And God brings people together. God will bring people together. And that is what, and even that's how we should pray also for our young people, that God choose the right one for these people. Because every single individual has a call. And you don't want that call to be moved away because of a wrong person. It's very easy. People can just drift away because they married the wrong person. And there are two people whom God has chosen for his work, for his purpose, but they can drift away if they are not the ones that God has brought together. Not saying that God will put punishment in their lives and all that, none of those things. But it's just that purpose begins to shift, Purpose begins to move away. And so we have to be sincere in asking God and what he wants to do, right? So chapter 25 is Abraham's death. Abraham took another wife whose name was Keturah. Now, when you read verses 1 to 11, most scholars place it before Sarah's death. This is not after Sarah's death. Usually, if you read the lines and the way the genealogy is mentioned, this is probably before Sarah died. But technically, it is written in chapter 25. Because at 1 year, 140 plus years, it was difficult for him to bear so many children, because he died at 175. The promise was given when? Through Sarah, right? But this is around after Isaac, this is probably that time, but not after her death. Okay, so the placing of this chapter is a little bit of a debate. that why is it placed here? It should have been placed before Sarah's death. Okay, so it's not a controversy. It's just that it is placed there. Why is it mentioned afterwards? Because many of these people you will see in biblical history, and also Abraham will be the father of what? Many nations. That is why probably it is mentioned in 25, because God gave the promise then, and it's around this time. So if you notice names, I think there is a chart of Abraham's descendants in your manual in the end. If you look at the chart, different wives and who came through them, and you can trace nations from that genealogy. I think it's there. I don't know if it's on the chart. Maybe we can show it during the break or something. But maybe it's there. The descendants of Abraham. It's probably at the fourth or the fifth map, Abraham's genealogy, or people who come through his line. I don't have it in this book, but it should be there. Is there? Yeah? Yeah, that's the one. You can see it. Okay. Is it after the journeys of Abraham, that map? Yeah. So there is the journeys of Abraham is mentioned, and then next to it is, I think, mentioned the children who are born to him. Right? So, yeah, just go through it. And so, if I would not tell you, you would not know, but you would think that, he's after Isaac's wedding is, again he has children. No, technically it is before Sarah's death, because he's 140 plus now, so it is not possible for him to bear children. So it is before, but it is only placed here just for genealogy's sake and for the names, because you will find nations coming out of this, and God's promise is being fulfilled just before he dies in that sense, so it's mentioned there. And in chapter 12, you will also see, in verse 12 onwards, you will also see descendants of Ishmael are mentioned. Okay, this is verses 12 to 18. Okay, 12 to 18, descendants of Ishmael. Right? (175), right? He described as what? In verse 8, breathed his last, died in a ripe old age, old man, satisfied with life, and he was gathered to his people. It's a great verse, right? He was satisfied with life, everything that happened in his life. Done. Sons Ishmael and Isaac buried him in the cave of Machpelah in the field of Ephron. Sons of Zoar the Hittite, facing Mamre, in the field where Abraham purchased for the sons of Heth, right? And so it came about of the death of Abraham that God blessed his son Isaac. Isaac lived in Bir Lahai-roi. Okay. Now, verses 12 to 18, descendants of Ishmael, and that's probably the last you will hear of them. So you are hearing Isaac, Ishmael. Now, God's promised child is Isaac, and work of God will move ahead with the line of Isaac. Ishmael now slowly goes out of the picture. Okay, he will now be out of the picture. In verse 17, these are the years of the life of Ishmael, 137 years. He breathed it last, died, and was gathered to his people. So Abraham's death is mentioned in this chapter. Ishmael's death is mentioned in this chapter. Okay. Now it is not that it happened simultaneously. Abraham 175, Ishmael is 137. But just for our sake, God just chooses to close the story of Ishmael there. Doesn't go ahead with that, and now only focus through Isaac. Isaac is 40. Okay, and then at 60 he will bear a child. He will have a son. That means Ishmael was also around a little bit, maybe 76. So he lived another 50 years or so. But the Bible just comes to a point, and Ishmael dies, and just closes the whole thing. They settled from Havilah to Shur, east of Egypt, as one goes towards Assyria. He settled in defiance of all his relatives. Interesting verse. He settled in defiance. What was he going to be? Wild man. He is defiance. He is always fighting, always against, right? Isaac's sons, verse 19. These are the records of the generations of Isaac, Abraham's son. Abraham became the father of Isaac. Isaac was 40 years old when he took Rebekah, the daughter of Bethuel, of the Armenian of Paddan Aram. sister of Laban, Aramean, to be his wife. Isaac prayed to the Lord on behalf of his wife because she was barren. Sarah was barren. Now Rebekah is barren. Right? Can you imagine God would bring the nation of Israel? And then later on you will see Rachel is also barren. Leah is also barren. 3 barren women. And Israel is still there today in the land. Where do they come from? 3 barren women. Right? What is the key? Isaac prayed. God completes his promise. Lord answered him, and Rebekah, his wife, conceived. But the children struggled together within her. And she said, if it is so, then why am I this way? So she went to inquire of the Lord. The Lord said to her, 2 nations are in your womb. 4 things you will see here. 2 people will be separated to you from your body. One will be stronger than the other, but the older will serve the younger. 4 things are mentioned here, the birth of the twins. So Sarah waits how long? 25 years. Rebekah waits how long? 20 years. You will see on later. Jacob waits for his marriage for 14 years. Joseph will wait for what? 20 years to be reconciled with his brothers. What's going on now? Why is God taking so much time, And this is Psalm 31 verse 15. Our times are in his hands. Our times are in his hands. But remember this key thing. He is never late and he is never wrong. They may wait 25, 20, 14, but he is never late and he is never wrong, right? Because our times are what? Are in his hands, Never take a shortcut when God asks you to wait and try to hurry up things. Never do that. Never do that, Eventually, when he does it, it will be beyond your description. You could not even imagine. So 4 things he will mention. Rebekah would bear twins. There would be 2 great nations coming out of it. 2 separate distinct group of people will come. One will be stronger than the other, and the older will serve the younger. Okay. From Esau will come the Edomites. From Jacob will continue Israel. Okay. Both. The Edomites never ever succeeded in overruling Israel, ever. Okay? Edomites never were able to get over the Israelites. Now the first came forth red, all over like a hairy garment. They named him Esau. Okay? So he was red all over, which means full of hair. His name was, he was full of hair. Okay? There is a medical condition that is called, I think it is hypertrichosis, it is called, where someone has got hair all over when they are born. So it's a medical term. So that, and he's red all over. So that's why his name is kept Esau. Okay? Esau. Esau means hairy. Okay? Afterward, his brother came forth with his hand holding on to Esau's heel. So his name was called Jacob, which means heel catcher or cheater. Okay? Isaac was 60 years old when she gave birth to them. So he was 40 at marriage, 60 when the kids came. Both the boys grew up. Esau became a skillful hunter, man of the field, but Jacob was a peaceful man living in the tents. Isaac loved Esau because he had a taste for game. Game means meat, okay? Wild animals, killing and eating. But Rebekah loved Jacob. Okay? Again, warning here, very simple, favoritism between parents. Okay? Favoritism between parents. Big problem. Isaac loves Esau. He's an outdoor person. Rebekah loves Jacob. He's an indoor person. So Isaac says, this is my boy. What about Jacob? Oh, he's always with the mother. When parents and children put their personal desires before God's desire, then there'll be trouble in the house. Favoritism never works in the family, and it is dangerous. So in the Christian family, there should not be favorites. This is mine, this is yours, and one is pampering the other. You know what happens in the end? Rebekah will train Jacob to cheat Isaac to get the blessing. Esau will sell his birthright. No, nothing spiritual is in the house. I can sell my birthright for one pottage, bowl of dal basically. She'll teach him to lie. He will manipulate the father. When Esau finds out, he says, I'll wait. When my father dies, I'll kill my brother. She somehow finds it, so she sends him away to her brother's house, thinking that this will happen quickly, and she will never see her son again. She favored him, but she lost him. He will be away for 20 years, and in the time of 20 years, she will die. She will send him away, but she'll never get to see him again. And she's thinking she's protecting him. She was never protecting him. It was all ungodliness going on. And I sometimes think, from that kind of family, God would bring the nation out. Because he keeps his promise. But it's God's not to be blamed in this. They made the choices. And so the Christian family can never be that way. I mean, should not be that way. I won't say never. We all do it sometimes. But if the favoritism goes on, the siblings will go against each other sooner or later. There will be fights with each other. Parents will have problems with each other. People will end up taking sides. Whole house will be in chaos. Where there is supposed to be peace, there will be war. And God's peace in person, His work is not experienced in the family. I mean, think like this. She's saying, and I'm just cutting short the whole story. Isaac settles in Gerar, chapter 26. You can read chapter 26 later on, because this is about the wells. And in this chapter, Isaac does exactly what Abraham does. He goes to the place and they say, "Who is this woman with you?" "She is my sister." Where did he learn to lie like this? From his father, obviously. Genetic liars. You will see later on, Jacob does the same thing. To protect himself, he will say, "Oh, I'm from same family." All three liars. All three said, "My wife is my sister," to protect themselves. It's very strange. 3 liars, 3 barren women, and we are still watching Israel in the land, because God is faithful to His promise. So there you see the abundance of blessing in Genesis 26. God blesses Isaac, And in chapter 26, 34, verse 34, there's the only problem that is mentioned. There is, Esau was 40 years old. He married Judith, daughter of Beri the Hittite, and Basemath, the daughter of Elon the Hittite, and they brought grief to Isaac and Rebekah. When Abraham planned for Isaac, what did he say? Do not take from outside, right? What does Esau do? He takes from outside. And what happens in the house? They bring grief to both. There is trouble to both, There is trouble to both of them. In 27, Jacob deceives. Now it came about when Isaac was old. Oh, we have gone over. Okay, we'll take a quick break and then we'll go to chapter 27. I think we should go till 30 today. Okay, just take a quick break. And we'll be, okay, 27. We'll start with 27 then.
Pastor, in Islam,
Yeah.
after Ismail, there is no person of renown before Prophet Muhammad and between Ismail.
Yeah, they try to find the genealogy, but it goes back to, in a sense, a lot of these tribes. Now, when you read some of their words, and there are people who are saying that you cannot be sure that Ishmael is a descendant of Arab people. Like, even that kind of thought pattern exists, because you don't find, how it is connecting. But usually because of the place where he settled, from where he is, and his description, people say that's the genealogy. But AD 635, so those people from there, those groups are there. And from AD 635, like when you see the story of Joseph, and the nomads are coming, and they take him along, they are believed to be Arabs, Midianites. So because of the way the place were, where they stayed. So those groups can identify, leading to AD 600. But till that kind of time, there is not a clear one mentioned. Now, in Quran, probably there is mentioned, but I'm not aware of it. But the Bible has the genealogy very specifically mentioned, so you can trace the whole line. But I don't know if you can do that there. They may use some things and add to it and show it, but I don't know if historically if that is correct or no. So.
How do they claim that, even Abraham and even Adam, the first man, was a Muslim?
Yeah, it's basically refuting. Now, when Muhammad was in the land and he was forcibly taking over, the pattern was very simple. He was referring to the old books and basically Moses. So a lot of it is a copy. So now remember, the books were available then. And so they trace their genealogy up to Ishmael, and then they don't take Isaac into the picture. And they go from Ishmael to Abraham, and from Abraham to Adam, saying this is the real line. Isaac's line is not the real line. Ishmael's line is the real line. So because the books were available then, the law was available, AD 635, the scripture is complete. Christianity is flourishing everywhere. But then comes this man, and his rule was very simple. If they agree, in that sense, then they become the same as you. If they don't agree, then kill them all. So with that kind of force, his force began to grow very fast. Because a lot of people feared and said, okay, we are on your side. So if you're on your side, then my agenda is, you follow my agenda too. So, well, that's what you think when you think, where is that religion coming from? Obviously the demons. The devil is the idea, the founder of it in a sense. Because it just copies exactly what the Christian faith speaks of, but it suits themselves. Because they are always at each other. They are always at each other. Now we are seeing unusual things, right? Saudi Arabia, Israel Accord, UAE, Israel Accord. We just wait for a little while. The real picture will come out. Iran and Russia, you will see what they do. This is all political gimmicks going on. None of this thing is going to last. It's all going to go for a little while. And Israel thinks they are doing well. We don't need you. Oh, thank you. We can manage on our own. You just wait for a little while.
God says that the older shall serve the younger.
Yeah.
And gradually we see that how Rebecca favors Jacob. Can we just say, think that God who knew already about Rebecca's favoritism?
No, of course the promise was given to her. But it does not mean you scheme to get it. Right? The promise was given, so she should have just trusted that God will do it in His time. But what was she doing is she was trying to get it. I'll explain, because what happens is when you talk about the birthright, there are certain privileges associated with it. So instead of waiting for God to provide it, she tries to make her own scheme to get it. Now when she tries to do that, basically what she's saying is, I don't trust God, I have to do it my way. That's where the trouble is, Yeah, she did manipulate. And the issue is here is when you read this when you understand it, what the background of Hebrew is, there is a clear-cut favoritism. Because what is Isaac living for? It says here very clearly, there is nothing spiritual. He says he liked game, which means son goes out, gets good hunt meat, and he likes to eat. So he is eating it, and that is his desire. But where is he investing in his son? There is no mention of it. There is Abraham also invests in Isaac. You can see it because Isaac is asking the question, where is the sacrifice? How would Isaac know? Because Abraham was always living in tents and altar, and he had an altar wherever he would go. So Abraham has that life of sacrifice, of faith, and all those things. But Isaac is not even close to it. Apart from Genesis 26, where he believes God, and of course he does the mistake, but when he comes, God blesses him agriculturally. And everything that he puts in, he gets 100 times, God increases it. A lot of people use that verse for offerings in prosperity in ministries. You give and God will give you 100 times back. Like, really? That was for Isaac specifically. Then you go dig a well first. That's going to get 100 times. Every time he would dig, they would come and put mud in it. So here think like this, that this is Isaac, but his only interest is that his son is a hunter and he gets game meat at home and I get to eat it. And Jacob, he's always with his mother, right? So he's neglecting him. But who should be investing in both of them? Himself. What does it say about Rebecca? Now this is a man who was reading the Bible, right? But when the children have come, He's lost a sense of responsibility. Sometimes I think, is it because of Abraham's death? There was no covering in a sense. Abraham is not there around. So who's going to minister to him? Well, it came down to his own walk with God. You know, was God ministering to him? Yes. But how was Isaac taking it? You don't see that there. So you don't see a lot of faith in Isaac. You don't see a lot of faith in Isaac. But you also see a lot of stuff that he does is physical, natural. It's basically carnality right there. He's not even interested. And when, when she's saying to bless the son, he doubts it. His eyesight is not good. He's doubting it. He's saying, how can he get the game so quickly? How can he get this meat so quickly? Come near. Why is he come near? Not the hands. He wants to smell. He wants to smell. Is he smelling like he's gone to the jungle and come back? So where is the trust in him? And she is successfully deceiving him. And I'm thinking God must be watching from heaven and saying, what's going on in this house? Like, I'll explain. There are 4 reasons for that, And Esau never considered his birthright important to him. In the New Testament, we say the call of God, The call of God was not important to him. My worldly success is more important. My passion, my desires are more important. What I like to do, that is more important than what God has called me to do. So a nation came out of him, by the way, too. Edom came out of him. But because of the promise of God, and it was not a bad promise. It was not something that was saying, oh, you are going to be a failure. That was not the promise. The promise was simple, The younger will rule over the older. Simple. Hebrews chapter 7 verse 7 is the same thing mentioned there. The younger will rule over the older. God is like very simple. And because that is God's idea of it. Wasn't David the youngest? Clear. Wasn't Joseph the youngest? Right? It was the idea of God. It doesn't mean that the youngest one is more spiritual than the older one. That is not the idea. But when it came to them, it was specific word from God. This is the one. Now, when it was with Joseph, what was it? It was his walk with God, because when he's alone, he still fears God. What was it with David? When he's alone, he still fears God. So that was the reason that they could do so well. That if you leave them alone, they know how to walk with God. That there are no one's around them, but they know how to walk with God. They know how to obey God. They know how to live for God. They don't, no one is there to minister to them, but they can do it. So that is spirituality,
Also in chapter 25 again, Abraham had Sarah as wife, Keturah as wife, and Hagar as maid. And it also says that he had children through concubines, and he sent them as steward. So does that mean that apart from wives, he always already had some more?
concubines, yeah. Like Hagar was one, right?
Hagar was one of them which is mentioned here.
Yeah, but we remember the law is not yet given. The law is not yet given, right? So that's why you see they are marrying family descendants. They are marrying close brother and brothers, and then the law is not yet given. When the law is given, then all this stops. God just stops prohibiting. He just prohibits the whole thing. It does not happen anymore.
What I understand is during this time it's okay to have
It was a cultural.
Yeah, yeah.
So at any given time he had like besides Sarah, he had more.
Yeah, he had. And also remember, with the Jews, they are very, who is going to be my heir? I want a boy, I want a boy, I want a boy. All the time it is there, That's why when you read the law, it says if the boy is born, then the woman is considered unclean for 30 days. Right? But if a girl is born, she is unclean for 66 days. Now, people will look at that verse and say, see, girl means. No, God was protecting the woman. Because if she is not considered unclean, the husband will say, come on, let's have sex again, I want a boy. He was protecting her for 2 months so that she would regain her strength, and then they could go forward. People misunderstand it and say, oh, girl is unclean, boy is superior. It's not that. It is because that's how the Jews were. So we can look at it from a natural side and say, boy 30, girl 66, she's unclean for 66, girl unclean, which means inferior. Not that at all. You need to know the history behind it. Why is God doing it? It was God's wisdom in doing it. Because if not, like, boy is born, 30 days unclean. The Jewish man is happy, my heir has come. So he's not in a hurry to make sure that she gets another child. But if a girl is born, he'll be like, let's do it again. I want another child. Until the time we don't get a boy. So God protected the woman, He was protecting the woman by saying, 66 is unclean. You can't touch her. So she would get strength to come back because she has to nurse the baby. She has to feed the baby. She has to take care of her health. So God would say, protect her. It's got nothing to do with it. Because sometimes I've heard people give weird explanations for these 66 days. Yeah, in those days, the woman, like, what rubbish. Like God has created man and woman and then He'll consider one clean and one unclean. Like, are you off your mind? Imagine saying that and women are sitting in the room and they're thinking like, oh man, when we were born, maybe we were unclean. Can you imagine how their faith will be in God? Why did God make this rule? Because are we inferior? Use your mind. That's the difference between studying and not studying. Simple. If you don't read the background, if you don't go to the isagogic basically means historical perspective of what was going on. So when you read this, we also study the historical perspective. What was going on at this point of time in that culture? If you don't study it, then this doesn't make sense to you. You think God is arbitrary, He does whatever He pleases and He will do whatever and you have to follow it. No, He was exactly doing as the times were. So it would make sense to the people who were living there. Very simple. Because if He would do anything as He pleases, whenever He pleases, then you say, oh, what kind of God is this? How can He be just then? How can He be gracious then? How can He be merciful then? How can you call Him a God of love then? And people who don't understand grace will take this and use it as a law. You are big, you are small, you're this and that. Come on. Read the historical background behind it, Not difficult. Okay. Oh, have we started class? No, we have not. On, eh? Oh. We should charge people for the abscess. Okay. Genesis 20. Okay. In Genesis, before 26, 25, remember this aspect, okay? From 27 to 34, remember the description of both the children. Esau is a skillful hunter. Jacob is a peaceful man living in tents, right? So when you see those things, Isaac loves Esau. Jacob is what? Mummy's boy. Okay, so there is problem because of what? Favoritism, right? But there are important things to mention here, that there are things here which involve spiritually. So there are twins, but they are physically different and spiritually different. One is an outdoor guy, one is an indoor guy. But look at this idea here, Esau has no value for the birthright. Jacob wants the birthright. So you see how spiritually they are. One is not cared about anything spiritual. The other one is saying what he has, that also I want. So that is the idea here. Now, why the birthright? The birthright involved four things. First, headship of the family. Okay? Headship of the family. So now, actually, because Esau is the first one, he gets the birthright. Jacob is second, so he does not get the birthright, right? So, second is the family priesthood. He is the one from where everything will come, So now you will realize why there was so much of a problem with the birthright. One is the headship, second is the priesthood, third is a double portion of the wealth. Okay, what do you mean double portion? You heard the story of prodigal son? The younger one said what? I want my hissa. In the Jewish custom, somebody asked for their share only when their father died. So somebody said, I want my share of the property. That can happen only if the father is dead. So the younger son said what? I want my share means what? To me, my father is dead. I want my share. Now, when the division happens, the firstborn will get two portions. His portion is because he is the older one, his birthright. Then from the balance, both will get equal. Okay? Because the birthright involves the family wealth. So what will he get is the double portion. For example, if the family has to divide, it's not going to be 50-50. It will be 66-33. The older one will get 66%, this one will get 33. He gets double. So the oldest one gets the double portion. Youngest one, prodigal son, came back home. The oldest one got double but still stood outside. My father did not kill a calf for me. If you read Luke 15, you will find out he gave money to both. He divided to both. He did not give to the younger son only. He gave it to both. They both got their share. One came back, the other one didn't. He still stood outside the house, So, fourth is designation of the covenant. Like through him, God's covenant will be fulfilled. Through him, God's covenant will be fulfilled. So 4 things were involved in this. Okay? Headship of the family, family priesthood, double portion of the wealth, and what? Covenant. He is the covenant carrier. Okay? So in 25, I'm going back because that's where the real story begins, and then we'll go to 27. Chapter 25, verse 29. When Jacob cooked the stew, Esau came in from the field and he was famished. Esau said to Jacob, please give me the swallow of that red stuff there. Okay? For I am famished. Therefore his name was called Edom. Edom again means red. Okay? Can you think? This is a man who is a hunter, which means physically strong, well built. And he comes and says, if I don't get that one bowl of dal, I'll die. It was not that he was hungry, but the idea was spiritually was bankrupt. No faith, no trust. And so he's saying, if I don't take this bowl of soup, I'll die. And he's supposed to be a hunter. He's supposed to be a strong man. But what's the point? The point is physical appetite. The physical appetite to him was more important than God. So he sees the soup and says, that's what I want, I'll die. I want this first. And you see here, and Jacob says, first sell me your birthright. And Esau says, behold, I'm about to die. So what's the use of the birthright to me? He's probably, Mayur is not here. So he's maybe like, he says, if I don't get one sandwich, I'll die. So take my birthright also. And Jacob said, first swear to me. He swore to him, sold his birthright to Jacob. Jacob gave him bread and lentils too. He ate and drank and rose and went his way. And Esau despised his birthright. How sad, How sad that there is such a difference in spirituality, What did he lose? All 4 things. He is not the head of the family anymore. No priesthood from his family. He won't get the double portion, and the generations will not remember him anymore. Now, God will call Jacob. From Jacob, he will be called Israel, and Israel remains till today. What if Esau had not sold his birthright? God saw from far what was going to happen. So the younger will what? Rule over the older. It was simple, He didn't make it happen, He didn't make it happen. They chose, He chose that way. And so now we go to 27. It came about when Isaac was old, his eyes were too dim to see, that he had called his older son Esau and said to him, my son, he said, here I am. Behold, I am old and I do not know the day of my death. Please take your gear. Go to the field and hunt game for me. Isaac and Esau are the same. I'm about to die. So how about teaching your son some spirituality? No, I'll go get me some meat. I want mutton curry today. I want maybe keema. Whatever. That's what he's saying actually. I am about to die. I don't know when I'll die. Give me my favorite dish. Don't you have two sons? Don't you have to tell them about God? No, I'm going to die. I need food. Please take your gear, hunt game. Prepare a savory dish for me, the one I love. Bring it to me that I may eat and that my soul may bless you before I die. What did Esau say a little while back? Give me this soup, otherwise I'll die. He's saying, bring me my food, otherwise I'll bless you and then I'll die. Like everything is around food. I mean, we are also that way sometimes, but not like this, For us, this is first food and then the other food, right? And between we get tea also. So, those of you who are online, sorry, you are missing. You can eat in your own homes. We have special stuff here today. Don't tell them what it was. So, it's definitely not lentil soup. So, now Rebekah is listening while Isaac spoke to his Esau, and Esau went to the field to hunt for game to bring home. And Rebekah says to Jacob, I heard your father speak to your brother. Bring me some game. Prepare a savory dish. My son, listen to me. Go to the flock. Bring me 2 choice young goats. I will prepare the savory dish for you, as he loves. Then you shall bring it to your father. He will eat and bless you before his death. How long did Isaac live after this? Probably 24 years. Can you think about it? After 20 years more he lived after this. And he said, oh, die. Maybe my food. Like, what's wrong with you? Little while ago, your son was going to die for soup. He will live another 100 years, whatever it is, Okay. Jacob answered to his mother and said, behold, my brother Esau is a hairy man. I am smooth. I shave every day. He does not. My father will feel me. Then I will be like a deceiver in his sight. I will bring upon myself a curse, not a blessing. Now 13 is the key verse. The mother said, your curse be on me, my son. She is saying, it's okay for you to deceive. If he curses, I'll take it upon me. You please go ahead. Don't worry. I am there with you. Because otherwise he'll get the blessing. You see what? There's a only obey my voice. What happened to her? She was humble, serving, submitted. Now she's saying, let your father curse me. Spirituality is not an ends to means to an end. I'll be spiritual till I get something, and after that I'll do whatever. He went from there, brought them to his mother. Mother made savory food as a father loved. Rebekah took the best garment of Esau and put on Jacob a son. She put the skins of the young goat on his hands, on the smooth part of his neck. She also gave him savory food with bread she had made to her son Jacob. He came to the father and said, my father, here I am. And he said, who are you, my son? He said, I am Esau, your firstborn. I have done as you have told me. Get up, sit up, eat the game, that you may bless me. How is it you have come so quickly? God made it happen. God, right? The God, He made it happen. Miracle happened. And Isaac said, please come close. I want to feel you. He has his doubts. He understands whether you are really my son Esau or not. And Jacob came close to his Isaac, and he felt him say, the voice is of Jacob, but the hands are of Esau. He did not recognize him because his hands were hairy, his brother's arms, so he blessed him. Are you really my son? He said, I am. Bring it to me. I will eat of my son's game. I will bless you. So he feels him. He hears his voice. Then he wants to eat also, to test him. It shows that he's uncertain. Something is not right. He senses it. Father ate and said, come and kiss me. Only because so that he can smell and find out if he's really him. He smelled of his garments, and he smelled and said, the smell of my son is like the smell of the field which the Lord God has blessed. Now God give you the dew of heaven, fatness of the earth, abundance of grain, new wine. May people serve you, nations bow down before you. Be master of your brother, your mother's sons bow down to you. Cursed be those who curse you, blessed be those who bless you. Here is the whole problem happened. That's why Esau will get angry now. If he curses his brother, it'll come back on him. And so he's upset now because now this blessing has gone off. And so this is all deceit. Nations will bow. He will be over his brothers. Those who curse him will be cursed. Those who bless him will be blessed, right? Israel will always dominate Edom, right? Verse 30 to 40. As soon as Isaac finished blessing Jacob, and he had hardly gone out from the presence, Esau came in. And he also made the food. And Isaac said, "Who are you?" He said, "I am Esau." Then he trembled violently and said, "Who was he who hunted game and brought it to me, so I ate of it before you came?" And he was blessed. And Esau heard the words and cried out exceedingly great and bitter cry and said to his father, "Bless me even so, my father." And he says, "Your brother came in deceitfully to take away your blessing. Is he not rightly named Jacob? For he has supplanted me these 2 times. Isaac replied, "I have made him your master, and all his relatives I have given as servants. With grain and new wine I have sustained him. Now as for you then, what can I do?" So he said and lifted his voice, and Isaac answered him and said, "Behold, away from the fertility of the earth shall be your dwelling, away from the dew of heaven above. By your sword you shall live, and your brothers you shall serve, and it shall come about when you become restless, that you will break his yoke from your neck." Esau bore a grudge against Jacob because of the blessing with which his father had blessed him. And he said to himself, "The days of mourning for my father are near, then I will kill my brother Jacob." So he realizes, Isaac realizes, and then he cannot do anything to overrule the blessing. And so in Hebrews 12:17 it says, Esau tried to get this blessing by tears, but he could not, because Isaac had already blessed, and under the inspiration of the Holy Spirit, his descendants would what? Dwell in a barren place. They will live by the sword, and they will serve Jacob. If you read history and see the Edomite nation, Edom, that's exactly what happened. They lived far away, and they were always submitted, in that sense. And verse 41, chapter 27, verse 41 to 28, verse 9. When the words of the elder son Esau were reported to Rebekah, she sent and called her younger son and said to him, "Behold, your brother Esau is consoling himself concerning by planning to kill you. Therefore, obey my voice, flee to Haran to my brother Laban. Stay with him a few days until your brother fury subsides." Few days. She thought it will happen quickly. She will never see him again. And Rebekah said to Isaac, "I am tired of living because the daughters of Heth," that is Esau's wives. "If Jacob takes a wife from the daughters of Heth, from the daughters of the land, what good will my life be to me?" So she's making up an excuse. Isaac calls Jacob, sends him away. You shall take a wife from the daughters of Canaan, which means in the promised land. Go to Padan Aram, house of Bethuel, your mother's father. From there take a wife from the daughters of Laban, your mother's brother. And then the blessing is given. So 27:41 to 28:9, now there is anger, there is malice in Esau. Rebekah, again manipulation. She wants to separate them. And she's, what is her concern? What if Jacob dies? What if Jacob dies? She is not mentioning Esau's plot to Isaac. She doesn't mention it. She hears it, but she uses something else which even Isaac did not like, his wives. Guess what would have happened if she had said, Esau wants to kill Jacob? Isaac would have never sent him away. No, it will not happen, don't worry. So she uses the other aspect and says, those wives. Remember it said in that chapter, the wives of Esau became a problem. Water too. And that's what had happened. And Rebekah wanted to send Isaac to send Jacob away, And if him away, Esau will not interfere. If Jacob goes on his own, Esau can go and interfere. But if Isaac sends him, then Esau cannot interfere because the father is sending him now. So there must be a plan and a purpose. So Esau will not interfere. Okay, dad is sending him away. So that this she cooks up this whole manipulation. She knows that if she uses the plot that he has made, then Isaac will not agree. He will not send him away. And so she says, oh, look at him. He bought these 2 wives. They are not from our people. They are causing us grief. Isaac would say, yeah, but I don't want this for Jacob. Let him go and get it from my house. He'll say, okay. What would Isaac think? Rebekah came from that household. From that household, why not for Jacob? Good will come. So go there. And that's the whole idea behind it. So, so Esau does not understand it. And Isaac's life will be what? Filled with unhappiness. His faith is tested. In some places he does well, but you don't see him doing well at all. You don't see him doing well at all. Apart from the land and the promise that he get of the wells, nothing is happening. Now in 28, verses 10 to 12, 10 to 22, is Jacob's dream. Jacob departs from Beersheba and went towards Haran. Then he came to a certain place, spent the night there because the sun had set. He took one of the stones to a place and put it under his head. Now, Jacob is going away from where God wants him to be. Jacob is not being in the place where he is. Why? Because his mother has made up all these circumstances. So he has to go. He had a dream. A ladder was set on the earth with its top reaching to heaven, and behold, angels of God were ascending and descending on it. So this is a vision. Now there are 7 visions that Jacob will see in his life. This is the first one. 3 days after traveling, he has a dream. So 7 recorded revelations to Jacob. 7. And this is the first one. What was the purpose of the dream? It was to strengthen Jacob's faith. Because now he's alone. His mom is not around. His father is not around. His brother is not around. He's on his own. And he knows why he's going. He's taken the birthright. The brother is ready to kill him. Anything can happen. So God comes to strengthen his faith. Why? Because there's a promise that God gave. The younger will rule over the older. And from there the work will go. Then the older brother has given away the birthright. Right? The older brother has given away the birthright. And verses 13 to 15. And behold, the Lord stood above it and said, I am the Lord, the God of your father Abraham, the God of Isaac. The land on which you will lie, I will give it to you and to your descendants. Your descendants will be like the dust of the earth. You will spread out to west, east. In you and your descendants shall be the families of the earth blessed. I am going with you, will keep you wherever you go. Verse 15, I will not leave you until I have done what I have promised. I will bring you back to this land. Jacob is running away from God and God is making promises to him. This is a beautiful picture of grace. There are 7 promises that God makes to him here. Some say 5, some say 7. But I'm just thinking of it. That God is making a promise when his son, when a child of God is running away from him. And he says, you run away from here, I'm going to bring you right back here. Let's see how far you can run. You're running away from the place I called you to be in. You're running away from the purpose I want you to be in. You're going to a different place, but I'm not leaving you. I'm coming after you, I will not leave you until I have done what I promised. Jacob awoke from his sleep and said, surely the Lord is in this place, and I did not know it. He was afraid and said, how awesome is this place? This is none other than the house of God and the gate of heaven. Suddenly his spiritual mind is awakened. Like, can you think like this, the nature and character of God here, that God is speaking to him, and he's giving him numerous blessings when he's running away from God, and he will have numerous descendants, and God will give him the land. Through Jacob, all the nations in the earth will be blessed, and unbelievable blessing. Like I was thinking, this guy cheated, this guy fooled everyone, he's playing games, he's out on his own, and how come God comes and gives him the promise? And then we have to look in the mirror and say, okay, I get it. Same thing is with us also, right? Like, if it was not for the grace of God, where would we be? Where would we be? And it's an unbelievable picture of the grace of God, that he would come back and use him, Think like this. He's going to be with Jacob, he's going to watch him, he's going to bring him back, he won't forsake him. Verse 16, that God is in this place and this is the gate of heaven. House of God, gate of heaven. right? House of God, gate of heaven. Verse 18, Jacob rose early in the morning, took the stone he had on his, and put a head, set it up as a pillar, and poured oil on its top, and he called the name of the Lord Bethel, house of God. Before it was the city of Luz. Now, poured oil on the rock does not mean idol worship. The act was of pouring of oil. That was the sacrifice kind of a thing that he was recognizing, he was worshipping. So it was not about the stone. Jacob made a vow, if God will be with me and keep me on this journey that I take, and will give me food to eat and garments to wear, and I will return to my father's house, then the Lord will be my God. There we go again. Just now he's given him all the promises. Look at what he's asking for. If he is with me, he will keep me, he will give me food, garments, bring me back to my father's house safely, then he is my God. Material. No spirituality. There is zero spirituality here, right? And he is making what? This is, by the way, the first vow in the Bible. First vow that he takes. If God does this, then, the stone which I have kept as a pillar will be God's house, and all that you give me, I will give you a 10% of it. So, Abraham tithed, Jacob says, I will also tithe if you give me this. Like conditions before God. In Genesis 14, Abraham said the same thing too, but he gave without God asking. Big difference in those two. One gave, when Abraham gave, he recognized and worshipped God. Jacob is setting up terms. Now, you must understand this aspect that when Jacob is being given all the promises, he worships, but he still is asking for something, which means he does not fully believe in the promises. He is wanting to play again an exchange game. Why? He's so used to it. Didn't he do the same with Esau? I'll make it for you if you give me a birthright. I will do something for my father if he gives me the blessing. I'll obey my... So he is still used to it, and now he is doing it with God. What is this principle? It is basically saying he is depending a lot upon himself. He still has a lot of his own strength in him. I will do it if you bring me back. He is thinking about himself all the time. He is not thinking about God. And you will see later on why God breaks his thigh bone. That's the strongest bone in the human body. God will break him and make him limp. You have to stop leaning upon yourself. As long as he leans upon himself and his understanding, he is only going to mess it up. And God, and the chicken will come home to roost someday. Laban will do the same thing to him what he did. It will happen back. Why? He's Proverbs 3. Remember 5 and 6. Trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. He will lean on his own understanding and play games with God. If you bless me, if you do this for me, then I will follow you. Then you are my God. Show me proof, God. Show me proof that you are for me. Then I will believe. Chapter 29, he went on his journey, came to the land of the sons of East, saw a well in the field. And if you read that portion, he is working for Laban now. Verse 1 to 14 is his introduction to Laban, right? You can read the chapters at home. I'm just going to concisely speak about it, and then we'll make a few comments. I'll give you what to read for next week, so you can be prepared for that. And he's approaching. Laban's daughter Rachel is approaching at the well when he wants to have a drink, and Rachel arrives with the sheep. And she goes and tells the father the good news that someone from your home, your relative, has come, right? It is well with him, he's coming up. Look at verse 10. When Jacob saw Rachel, the daughter, sheep of the Laban mother's brother, Jacob went up and rolled the stone for the mouth of the well, watered the flock. Jacob kissed Rachel and lifted his voice and wept. Jacob told Rachel that he was a relative of the father, and he was Rebekah's son, and she ran and told her father. When Laban hears the news, he runs to meet him, embraces, kisses him, brings him, and he related to Laban all things. Laban said, surely you are my bone and my flesh, and he stayed with him a month. Okay. Verse 15 onwards, there is a marriage contract, verse 15 to 30. Laban says, because you are my relative, should you serve me for nothing? Tell me what will be your wages. Laban had 2 daughters. Older one was Leah, younger one was Rachel. Leah's eyes were weak, Rachel was beautiful of form and face. So Jacob loved Rachel, And he said, I will serve you 7 years for your younger daughter, Rachel. Laban said, it is better that I give her to you than to any other man. So Jacob served 7 years for Rachel, and they seemed to be what? Few days because of his love. Okay. Then he said, 7 years complete, give me my wife. Evening came, he took his daughter Leah and brought her, and Jacob went into her. Laban also said to the maid Zilpah to his daughter Leah as a maid, when it was morning, what is it you have done? Why is it not Rachel that I have served you for? And so Laban says, well, tradition, older girl first, younger girl next. Right? So it's coming back now. You think you are the manipulator, I am better than you. So you get back, right? God will not allow the believer to sin successfully. He will get it back, right? So now he says, what happened to Jacob's wives? Could he not recognize his own wife? Remember, they were not living in present day. They were living in tents. Lights were outside, flames, and she would wear a thick veil. So probably he did not see her till morning. Okay, so please don't. Why did he not make out? What? That is all in the movies, right? So remember. Okay. And by the way, understand this. This plot could not have happened without Leah's participation. She was in it. They know that he has to marry Rachel. And he's putting Leah in there, which means she is also a game to it. She knows what she is doing. So she is also a part of the plan. Right? It cannot happen without, she not knowing it. And so he's saying, this is our custom of the area, always the older daughter first. And so he will work 7 more years, to marry her. And he does that again. And when we look at, verse 30 in chapter 29. Jacob went into Rachel also, and indeed he loved Rachel more than Leah, and he served Laban for another 7 years. And the Lord saw that Leah was unloved, and he opened her womb, but Rachel was barren. Right? So this marriage happens. Jacob is still loving whom? Rachel. He does not want Leah. Both are barren. What does God do? He opens up Leah's womb first. Now, if you read the names of the kids and you understand their meaning, you will realize why it is in this order. Okay? So it says here, Leah conceived and bore a son. Now, what does the Jewish man want? The Hebrew people? Son. So here comes the first son. Reuben. What does Reuben mean? Look, a son. So Leah is thinking what? If I give Jacob a son, he will become closer to me. So she says, we'll name him Reuben. Look, a son. Because the Lord has seen my affliction, now my husband will love me. She knows it. Then she conceived again and bore a son, because the Lord had heard that I am unloved. And he gave me a son, and I called him what? Simeon. At least now my husband will what? Hear me. Simeon means hearing. So look, a son, so that at least my husband will love me. My husband is still not loving me. So another son. Now I've given him 2 sons. Now he'll get close to me. I'll name him hearing. Now at least he'll hear. She conceived again, bore him a son. This time my husband will become attached to me, because now I've borne him 3 sons. She called the son Levi. Levi means attached, to attach. Okay? One who hears, one who is attached. No change in Jacob's attitude. So she conceives again. And she says, forget this Jacob, I will praise the Lord. Name is Judah. From a barren woman who was unloved by her husband will come all the kings of Israel and the whole priesthood. Judah and Levi. Amazing grace of God. From the one who was unloved, God loved her. He opened her womb first, and he gave her the sons. And maybe Jacob is not loving her, but see what God is doing. Those 2 major things in the entire history of Israel, all kings and all priests will come from a woman who was unloved. And this is again amazing picture of the grace of God in this family. Right? Now, chapter 30, again, it speaks about Jacob's sons, and you can read it later on, but I'll just quickly give you all the names. And again, Rachel does not conceive, so she gives Bilhah, right, her handmaid, and Bilhah will have 2 kids now. Okay, Dan means God has vindicated, and Naphtali means struggle. So 2 sons through Rachel's handmaid, because she is not conceiving. So what did Sarah do? Hagar. What is Rachel doing? I cannot conceive, so use my handmaid to bring the line out. God has vindicated me and my struggle. So Leah says, Acha, my turn again. I'm going to bear more children. Okay, she gives her handmaid Zilpah to Jacob. Zilpah bears 2 children, Gad and Asher. Gad means good fortune, Asher means happy. Okay. All these children will later on become what? The 12 tribes of Israel. It's amazing what is going on here. Happy am I, for the woman will call me happy. So she named him Asher. In the days of wheat harvest, Reuben went and found mandrakes in the field, and he brought them to his mother Leah. And then Rachel said to Leah, please give me some of your son's mandrakes. But she said, is it a small matter for you to take my husband? And would you also take my son's mandrakes also? So Rachel said, therefore he may lie with you tonight in return for your son's mandrakes. Think what is going on. Now, the harvest season is basically May and June. Okay, mandrakes, they are, in those days, they were yellow berries, and they were called love apples, if you remember yesterday's message. They were a symbol of romance, right? So this is what has happened. And the reason is they would aid in fertility. That is why it was in demand. That's why they would ask. But Leah does not want to share, and Rachel has to give up her rights. And, the sisters are exchanging sexual favors for their husband. It's crazy what is going on right now. And this is jealousy. And out of this jealousy will come the 12 tribes of Israel. Unbelievable. And you're like, what the heck is going on here? You can look at this and you can say, what are you doing, God? And he's there. He knows what he's doing. All this can make us very discouraged. There's no spirituality. He says, yeah, but my seed is sown in them. You will see what I will do. Then God opens up Leah's womb and she continues. But think like this, Rachel is still not bearing children. Why is God holding it back? Leah will get 2 more children, Issachar, which means reward, and Zebulun, which means honor. So 6 sons, but she still does not get Jacob's love. Then she will also give birth to Dinah, Jacob's daughter. Then Rachel cries out to God, and God remembers Rachel, and he gives him a son, gives her a son, right? And what's the same name of the son? Joseph. May the Lord give me another son. God has taken away my reproach and given me, and may he give me another son. And Rachel had borne Joseph, and Jacob said to Laban, send me away. I will go to my own place and my own country. Right? Why was Joseph the most loved? He was the last one in that sense. In Joseph, may he add. May he add. And there was a prayer attached to him that there would be another son. So verses 25 to 43 is Jacob's prosperity. You can read that. How is male, the striped and the spotted male goat, speckled and the female. And this is, Jacob had never asked for fixed wages. And so he suggested that all the speckled, spotted or dark colored sheep and goats would be given from Laban's livestock. And usually the sheep were white in that region and goats used to have a solid dark color. Laban quickly agrees to it, said, okay, all that are spotted. So goats, solid one color, sheep are white, and he's asking for something different. Okay. Laban does not trust him, and so he removes all the 3-day journey, and he removes the branches, but Jacob separates the spotted lambs and animals, and you can see that, and that's how he builds his wealth. In 31, 1 to 21 is the story of how Jacob leaves secretly for Canaan. Okay. Verse 6, you know that I have served your father with all my strength, Yet your father has cheated me, changed my wages 10 times. However, God did not allow him to hurt me. Thus the speckled shall be your wages, and the flock brought forth speckled. If he spoke, the striped will be your wages, then the flock brought forth striped. So God has taken away your father's livestock and given them to me. So in the favor of God. Verse 13, I am, in a sense, the angel of the Lord said to me in my dream, and then he recounts it, I am the God of Bethel, where you appointed a pillar, where you made a vow to me. Now arise, leave this land, return to the land of your birth. God is calling him back again. And 31, 22 to 55 is the covenant. Okay? And this is verses 43 to 55. So you can read it at home. Chapter 32, Jacob fears Esau. Just 2 more minutes and we'll close, okay? Jacob fears Esau. This is God's camp, so he named the place Mahanaim. Okay? He's coming back now. He sends his messengers before. Verses 9, 10, 11 and 12 are the key verses in chapter 32. Okay? So just remember that and read them well. 9, 10, 11 and 12. Okay? These are 1 to 20 is the encounter with the angels, and 24 to 32 is the key in this chapter. Jacob wrestles. Okay. Then Jacob was left alone, and a man wrestled with him until daybreak. When he saw that he had not prevailed against him, he touched the socket of his thigh. So the socket of Jacob's thigh was dislocated while he wrestled with him. Then he said, Let me go, for the dawn is breaking. I will not let you go unless you bless me. So he said, What is your name? And he said, Jacob. He said, Your name shall no longer be Jacob, but Israel, for you have striven with God and with men and have prevailed. And Jacob asked him and said, Please tell me your name. And he said, Why do you ask my name? And he blessed him there. So Jacob named the place Peniel, for he said, I have seen God face to face, yet my life has been preserved. And now the sun rose upon him. He crossed over Peniel and was limping on his thigh. Therefore, to this day, the sons of Israel do not eat the sinew of the hip, which is on the socket of the thigh, because he touched the socket of Jacob's thigh and the sinew of his hip. Okay, so this is an encounter with God, and they fought the whole night, right? And then the angel employs supernatural strength. Jacob is in pain, but he does not give up. And towards daybreak, Jacob asks him to let him go. And Jacob wants to see the face of the angel, and it's basically the Lord. So he asks him for prayers and tears. He asks him for spiritual strength. And the next day, in the sense, this indication is now that he will have a hunger for God. He will have a hunger for God. You know, he wanted the blessing of God. And God is saying, now I will do it, but I will give you what? The hunger for God. And this is his indication that he is now turned. This is changed now. You know, he's changed. And he will be given a new name shortly, and we will see that later. Okay, so 33 to, I think about 41, 42. 33 to 45 is probably where we'll go next week. So just read through that, chapters 33 to 45, and we'll cover that next week. So we'll close at 32. My suggestion, reread 26 onwards to 32, and if you have any further questions, let me know. Okay, we've just skipped some part, basically being because not a lot of doctrinal stuff. So 26 to 32 you can read, and for next week, 33 to 45 is what we will cover. Okay. Lord, dismiss us now in Jesus' name. Amen. Right?